In tech matters, IT modernization at the Federal Communications Commission. The agency faces an uphill battle. Their technology is old, their staff is small, their budget is limited. But after a long period of instability, the commission has an experienced CIO. David Bray joined the FCC about 10 months ago. He sat down with Government Matters' Diane Cho at the Executive Leadership Conference.
Yes, so at the FCC, we have relationships both with the public as well as many different stakeholders with the private sector in addition to government agencies. And right now we have 207 different IT systems. Most of them were built in the late 1990s, some in the early 2000s. On average, more than half of them are more than 10 years old. And so what we really want to do is actually create a common data platform. And on top of that platform, then have different processes. So that ideally I can say I have 207 different processes, but not 207 different IT systems. And those would interface with the public in terms of, being involved with rulemaking, providing comments. They'd also be interfacing with the private sector in terms of if you want to file licenses or participate in auctions. And then other government agencies in terms of where are different cell phone towers or where is the mapping of different resources that the FCC actually works with our private sector partners with on.
You're doing some innovative things on an incremental level. The FCC Speed Test App is one example. So what is it exactly, and how is that app a part of your strategic priorities?
Yeah, so the FCC Speed Test App is a wonderful example of where in the past we used to pay for installations in homes as well as driving cars around to test cellular signal strength as well as internet broadband access speeds. And so we had to pay for that. But what we actually did was we actually wrote an app. We made the code open source so you could actually make sure that the code actually was protecting your privacy. We don't collect your IP address. We don't know who you are within a 5-mile radius, so it actually can be anonymous. And if you choose to download that app on your Google device or your iOS device, it'll actually test your connection speed, provide you with an immediate result, but then anonymously report that to a third party that will share it with the FCC so we can actually produce the first crowdsourced map of the nation by provider of connection speed. And that's then sort of the model of where in the past we had to pay for that. The public can actually volunteer by consent to actually be part of the solution of actually monitoring connection speeds. The interesting thing was we thought, well, maybe we'd get 5,000 to 6,000 people using it. For a while it was the 4th most downloaded app on the iOS store, right behind Google Chrome.
Another priority, virtual desktops, of course, for telecommuting, but the practice itself is under new scrutiny. Did you make any adjustments to those virtual desktops after the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office report broke?
So I see that we are providing the capacity for telecommuting and telework. It's actually up to the bureaus and offices how they want to use it. Maybe it's something that's in terms of when you're on travel but you're still working, or maybe you need to access over the weekend and you need something more than just webmail. You actually need access to your Microsoft Word documents. But the practice of telework and telecommuting really should come down to the actual managerial level, and they should make determinations based on what does their team need, how does the team perform, can you actually have deliverables up front so you can actually monitor are those deliverables being done. But as IT, as a CIO, I'm just providing the capability for that tool.
In September, the Washington Post ran a story titled "Inside the Collapse of the FCC's Digital Infrastructure and the Rush to Save It." And it profiled your electronic comment filing system as it struggled to keep up with the flurry of comments on so-called net neutrality. The ECFS is one of 207 dated IT systems at the FCC. So is it taking up a substantial amount of your time?
So in terms of CIO, my time is probably evenly split across all the different major systems we have. In terms of the team, we have a technology team that's focused on our infrastructure. And so yes, with the commenting period, what we had was the electronic commenting filing system basically was appropriate for 1996 and had not received any major updates. There had been some cosmetic updates along the way and some minor code updates, but the overall database was still essentially 1996. And so that presents interesting challenges when you actually get to the era in which there now can be mass filings at once, and in fact mass filing of comments both by humans as well as automated filers. And so what we saw was the first time around, and actually that's what the article talked about in the Washington Post, the first time around it was actually not a huge volume of comments, but people realized that they could file a comment and search for it a split second later, and if you did this over and over again, it would create the appearance that the system was being tied up. And so we actually had to figure out a workaround because unlike a bank or a military Department of Defense, I can't actually block people from actually participating. Again, we have to be open to everybody. And so how can you be open even if there's interesting cyber behaviors going on? And to the team's credit, the technology team, they worked into the night, they got in early in the morning, and within 36 hours they figured out a way that could keep everything open for comments, but at the same time have a way so that if people did try to do that behavior of searching for something, as soon as they posted it, it wouldn't tie up the system for anybody else.
In past interviews, you've mentioned giving the FCC, quote, a startup mentality. You want your staff to take more risks. Why is that?
Yes. So our world is changing. Part of my observations, having served in both the private sector and the public sector myself, not only are things changing quickly, they're actually changing at an accelerating clip. For example, we're going from 7 billion network devices in 2013 on the face of the planet to 14 billion by 2015 to estimates of anywhere between 50 to 200 billion by 2020. That's clearly not a world in which linear models will work. And so I feel like we need to figure out new ways of working together and new ways of actually sort of addressing the needs for the public. But that's change. And to do change, it's almost like being an entrepreneur. It's just an entrepreneur on the inside. So I call them intrapreneurs. And so I see my job as a senior executive is to be that sort of top cover that one says, where do we want to go? Where do we think makes sense in terms of value for the public? Let's actually talk to our stakeholders and get their inputs. But once we actually figure what that is, then I shift into the role from being digital diplomat to being that of a human flak jacket, so that the team can actually try new ideas, they can actually experiment. There's actually a wonderful quote which says, to get expertise, you need to run experiments. And what's interesting is the Greek word exper means out of danger. So essentially, to get expertise, you must run experiments, and experiments are dangerous practices that actually inform how you can go forward.
As we all know, in general, government CIOs don't really stay in one place for a long time. The FCC, of course, is no exception, with 9 CIOs in 8 years. Meanwhile, people have named you as a possible successor to Steve Van Rokel. So is there any truth to that?
All I know is right now I'm focusing solely on the FCC. I've heard rumors that my ears should be burning, but right now I'm basically focusing on the FCC. We have a lot to do. At the same time, I've also been trying to focus on make sure we have a 24-month plan that can be dynamic and adjust if necessary. But where my energies and my heart is right now at the FCC.
Okay. David Bray, thank you again for joining us in Government Matters.
Thanks for having me.